When Polestar launched as a standalone brand back in 2017, it said it wanted to be the guiding star of the electric car revolution. 6 years on, has it been? In terms of products that we've actually been able to drive, we've only really got the Polestar 2 to judge the progress. Yes, before the 2 we had the Polestar 1, but that was a hugely expensive plug-in hybrid which was only ever going to sell in small numbers. But the 2 was different. When it launched back in 2020, it was the first car to hit the road as a direct competitor to the Tesla Model 3. And it was stylish, the numbers looked good on paper, but it wasn't actually that great. You might love the Polestar brand and its image and the styling of the car, but in terms of ride comfort, performance, handling, it definitely wasn't groundbreaking, and it definitely wasn't better than a Model 3. But now, the Polestar 2 has had a raft of significant updates, and in this review, we're telling you exactly what's new and what it's like now. Before we start, subscribe to our channel to see lots more reviews like this, and go to whatcar.com for a great deal on your next car. So, the changes. On the outside, you can see it does have a slightly different look from before, and that is because it's now got this body-coloured panel on the front here. Polestar calls this the Smart Zone, and apparently this houses some active safety features. It's got a camera and also some radars and sensors in there as well. That's about it cosmetically though, apart from some new 20-inch alloys. But the big changes are underneath. That includes revised batteries with longer ranges and faster charging rates, improved electric motors with even better performance, and a highly unusual and very dramatic change, which we'll go into more detail on later. First, let's remind you what this interior is like. And this is actually an area of the Polestar 2 that hasn't changed from before. So just like we had with the old car, you still got this really classy, clean, premium feeling layout in here. And in terms of interior quality, this is definitely better than what you find in a Model 3. You've got a really nice mix of materials, it all feels solidly put together. It is very, very impressive indeed. But since this car went on sale, some new rivals have entered the picture. So it's not just the Model 3 that the Polestar 2 has got to worry about. Now you've got the Hyundai Ioniq 6, you've got the BMW i4. Compared to those interiors, the Polestar 2 does feel better in terms of quality than the Ioniq 6. This feels more premium than that car. But compared to the BMW i4, that car is just a bit more consistent with the quality of materials that it uses and feels even more robust than what you get in the Polestar 2. But this is still impressive. In terms of tech, it's also good. That's the same as before as well. So you've got this clear, big digital driver display. You've also got this tablet-style portrait touchscreen infotainment system. And this is reasonably responsive. It can be a little hesitant jumping between some of the different menus, but for the most part, it's a responsive touchscreen. And because it's been developed with Android, it's got a fairly intuitive layout, and it certainly feels more intuitive than a lot of other infotainment systems that are out there. And don't worry, if you have an iPhone, this still has Apple CarPlay, although it's not wireless, it's only wired, which is a bit annoying. But the most annoying thing about this infotainment system is the fact that the climate controls are on it. They're not even always visible as well. So you have this shortcut button down here to bring them up, but it's still a bit of a faff diving into a menu, poking at the screen to change the temperature and the fan speed. And it's just far more distracting, fiddly, complicated than if you just had physical controls to do the same thing while you're driving. So that's a shame. But still, this is a very good interior, which also has a reasonable amount of storage up front. You can see you've got this massive chunky center console thing here, which gives you a storage tray at the top of it. You've also got some side compartments here. Under this armrest, you've got a hidden cup holder and some more general storage around it. There's another cup holder in front of it. The door bins are a bit small, but the glove box at least is a decent size. So all in all, just like before, this is a very good electric car interior. But while the front is good, the rear seats don't impress much. Sat back here, I'm not even 6 foot, and I can't sit up straight without my head touching the roof lining. Legroom is okay, it's not amazingly generous. That isn't the problem though, it is the headroom. Because if you're tall, sat in the back, you're gonna be very cramped and uncomfortable. And it's not like this is a particularly small car on the road either, so that is quite a big disappointment. It's also a shame that even though this is an electric car and lots of its rivals have flat floors in the back, you're stuck with this massive lump in the floor here. So sitting 3 people side by side will be not as convenient as it would be in lots of other rivals. So really, a Model 3 is far better in the rear seats than the Polestar 2. An Ioniq 6 is similarly bad with headroom, but has significantly better legroom than what the Polestar 2 offers. So it's clear, if you're looking for an electric car this sort of price, this sort of size, and rear seat space is a big priority for you, then you're going to be better served elsewhere. Now, the Polestar 2 has a hatchback opening, which is more practical than the saloon rivals that it's up against. So you can see you've got this really big, easy area, which makes throwing things in, getting things out very easy, certainly easier compared to the saloon alternatives that it's up against. In terms of the actual space that you get in this boot, it's also pretty good. In total, we could fit 7 carry-on size suitcases back here, which is the same that you can fit in an Ioniq 6, although both are quite a bit behind a Model 3, which can fit 10 in total, but that includes 1 in the front boot as well. Now, back here in the Polestar 2, you can see it's a big, easy, simple open space with a handy divider in the middle of it, which has got these hooks to hang your plastic bags, and there's also a decent amount of underfloor storage as well. And on top of all this, like the Model 3, the Polestar 2 has a front boot. It's not as big as the one that you get in the Model 3, but it's still big enough for the charging cables. But let's give you some more detail on the mechanical changes with the Polestar 2, and we will start with the batteries. So like before, you can have a standard range Polestar 2 and a long range Polestar 2. If you go for a standard range model, the battery now has a usable capacity of 67 kilowatt hours. And that means the official range, thanks to some efficiency improvements as well, is 331 miles. And that's the entry-level model, remember. So if you go for a long-range Polestar 2, that has a new battery with a usable capacity of 79 kilowatt hours. And if you go for a version with 2 electric motors, then the official range is 367 miles. But if you go for a version with 1 electric motor, which is the car that we have on test here today, then the official range of that car is 406 miles. So, wow, 406 miles, that is far. And in fact, the new Polestar 2 has one of the longest official ranges of any electric car around. And it's longer than any of this car's direct competitors. Of course, as with any other EV, the actual range you'll be able to manage in real-world driving conditions will be less. But still, the range that you can get from the new Polestar 2 is a huge plus for the car. And it means that this is an electric car that definitely does not have to be trapped doing short journeys in a city. And it's not just the range that's improved, the charging speeds are up as well. But the standard range car is still rather disappointing compared with most rivals. It can accept up to 135 kilowatts from a CCS charger for a 10 to 80% top up in around 34 minutes. But the Ioniq 6 can charge at 220 kilowatts and the i4 at 200 kilowatts. However, long-range versions of the Polestar 2 can now charge at a much more respectable rate of up to 205 kilowatts, which is a big 55 kilowatt improvement from before and gets you a 10 to 80% charge in 28 minutes. A full 0 to 100% charge at home using a 7 kilowatt wall box will take around 7 hours in the standard range or roughly 8 hours in the long range. Another thing that is new and highly unusual is the fact that with the previous Polestar 2 you could get a 4-wheel drive version or a front-wheel drive version. But now with this new Polestar 2, it's either 4-wheel drive or rear-wheel drive. Now this very unusual change has happened because apparently Polestar says it is more efficient for electric cars to be driven by the rear wheels than the front wheels. And actually there are a lot of other examples in the electric car world where things, if they're 2-wheel drive, are rear-wheel drive rather than the more conventional front-wheel drive. And even if you go for a 4-wheel drive version of this new Polestar 2, then at higher speeds, when you're on the motorway for example, it can effectively shut off the front electric motor, so it becomes only driven by 1 electric motor at the rear, making it more efficient. So has this switch from front to back absolutely transformed the Polestar 2 on the road? Well, the short answer is no. It is a bit better than it was before. It does now feel more agile through corners, but it is still the case that this really does feel like a big, heavy, tall car. So if you do go around a corner quickly, it's still the case that there's a lot more body lean in the Polestar 2 than there is in pretty much all of its other saloon rivals. The steering is also still quite numb. The brake pedal is a bit inconsistent, although the one pedal driving mode does work very effectively, and that is good to use around town. But the worst thing about the Polestar 2 on the road, like it was before, is the ride comfort. This just doesn't feel like an electric car that is particularly well suited to our battered, broken British roads over here, because it's very easily unsettled. Whether you're in town, whether you're on the motorway, you're constantly getting jostled around in this interior. And the suspension is very noisy as well, so when you do pass over lumps and bumps in the road, you hear all these thwacks going on around the interior, and it's just not very calming, not very smooth, not particularly electric. There are lots of other rivals that ride better than the Polestar 2, and lots of them are quieter as well, because particularly on the motorway, this is really quite a noisy electric car.
This new Polestar 2 is quicker than before though. The long-range single-motor version is up from 228 brake horsepower to 295 brake horsepower and can sprint from 0 to 62 miles an hour 1.2 seconds quicker than before. It does feel quick. The dual-motor version is even more rapid, but the update in performance for that version is very small compared to the change for this single-motor version. So it is still the case that while the Polestar 2 can be very quick, the range-topping versions of the Model 3 and i4 are quicker still.
The pricing of the Polestar 2 is quite close to the Model 3, which means it's also similar to the Ioniq 6, but a bit cheaper than an i4. The trouble is though, because this isn't particularly amazing on the road, it's difficult to recommend the Polestar 2 ahead of those other rivals, which are just better overall. It's definitely not the case that this is some terrible electric car that you have to avoid at all costs. The Polestar 2 clearly has some very big strengths, like the range you can travel on a full charge, and like this very classy interior that every model gets. But it also has quite a big weakness in how it is on the road, and that means that other electric rivals are easier to recommend ahead of this car. So this hasn't quite shown Polestar to be the guiding star of the electric car revolution. But remember, this is Polestar's first full EV. And over the next few years, we're going to see the Polestar 3, 4, 5, 6, they're all on the way. And maybe they will be the products that make us look back on Polestar as being an EV leader. Thanks for watching this review. If you want to see another one, click there. And if you want to go to whatcar.com to get a great deal on your next car and read our written review of the Polestar 2, click there.